For it is not just about skills, but equally about quality jobs. Always remember my commitment to that. So, dear President, honourable members, I thank you for the opportunity to address you on a matter that lies at the heart of our union's mission, to protect workers, especially in times of change. Restructuring in our industries is the reality of a dynamic, competitive economy, especially in a time of rapid transformations. It can drive innovation, productivity, it can secure Europe's place as a global leader. Yet, we must never forget that in every restructuring, there are lives, there are livelihoods at stake, workers, their families, their communities. The European Union was built on a promise of solidarity, of fairness, of opportunity for all. If restructuring comes at the cost of jobs, of workers' rights, or dignity at work, then it can endanger that promise, it can endanger our social model. When workers are supported through transitions, when their skills are upgraded, when their voices are heard, we build resilience, not just for individuals, but for our economies and for our societies as a whole. If restructuring processes are poorly managed, we risk having more inequality, less trust, more discontent that threatens our democracies. Across the Union, we see industries undergoing profound change, in automotive, in steel, in energy, just to name a few. Thousands of manufacturing jobs are being impacted. We cannot simply react. We must anticipate. Allow me to outline a few areas for action. First, that we need stronger social protection mechanisms. Workers in transition should be able to negotiate short-time work arrangements or have access to adequate unemployment benefits. Restructuring processes should be managed and anticipated to guarantee a just transition. Reinforcing collective bargaining and social dialogue, as well as promoting employee involvement and workers and their representatives' right to information, consultation and participation, these are key for an inclusive adaptation to the upcoming changes in the European labour market. Also, we must invest in skills as the backbone of resilience. It was mentioned before. The green and digital transitions, they are not threats to jobs. They can be opportunities, but only if we equip our workforce to really seize them. This is one of the pillars of the Union of Skills. And one of our proposals is to introduce a skills guarantee to support companies hiring or training people that are at risk of being laid off. Every worker facing redundancy should have a clear pathway to a quality and secure job. For all this and beyond, the Commission will engage with social partners to present a quality jobs roadmap by the end of this year. This roadmap will support fair wages, high standards for health and safety at work, good working conditions for men and women, training and fair job transitions for workers and the self-employed, notably by increasing collective bargaining coverage. Honourable members, we all know the cost of inaction is far greater than the cost of ambition. If we fail to act, we risk a two-speed Europe, one where some prosper amid change, while others are left to fend for themselves. That is not the union I believe in, nor the one you have fought to build. This Parliament has a critical role to play. Together, we can turn restructuring from a moment of crisis into an opportunity for renewal. Let us send a clear message. In Europe, progress does not come at the expense of our workers. It comes with our workers and because of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Commissioner. And the first speaker.
Ευχαριστώ πολύ την Επίτροπο. Ο κύριος Ράτκε έχει το λόγο εκ μέρους του ΕΛΚ.
Thank you.
Ευχαριστώ πολύ. Κυρία Πρόεδρε, κυρία Επίτροπε, ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ.
Wichtig, sich mit dieser Frage auseinanderzusetzen.
And I think it's important that we do look at this issue because the changes that we're seeing in Europe, in the environment, in industry, are quite considerable. I was asked by my child to wear this wristband so that I always would think of her. But I'm just thinking, what world is my daughter growing up in? It's not just the geopolitical upset that we're seeing at the moment, but also the question of disruption in the world of work. A world of work where we're thinking about our social model, our understanding of social market economy is in fact under pressure, as is the dignity of individuals at work, and also on the issue of, what is a good job? It's not just a question of getting people in work. It's also a political requirement to get people in decent work with collective bargaining, with co-determination. These are all things that are under pressure at the moment. So it's important that we in the European Union use the ways and means at our disposal to make sure that our understanding of the social model and the social market economy prevail. So thank you for this. Thank you, Mr. Radke. The next speaker is Estelle Keulemans.
Madame la vice-présidente.
Thank you, President, Executive Vice President. Ladies and gentlemen, as we have major transformations in Europe, not only in industry but in other sectors such as distribution, energy and transport, as this happens, and we have challenges for the climate and digital transitions, it is absolutely vital for us to commit to anticipate events and better respond to them. Often, we see thousands of people being laid off for the sake of shareholders with scant regard for workers' rights. Gaily hiring and firing with this disregard for fundamental rights brings dangers in its wake, and companies are sorely in need of qualified labour, and there's a danger that it won't be there, that they won't be able to find people to do those jobs. There's a clear need to maintain and save and upgrade jobs within the same sector or within the same region. Sure is needed, social dialogue, no abusive dismissals, and better support for subcontracted workers who are often directly affected by this. We also need ambitious industrial and economic policy, EU-wide. We need an investment instrument which is permanent. We also need to intervene in terms of public procurement to ensure that social and environmental rights are respected by companies. This resolution outlines a framework which is vital to relaunch European competitiveness, and yet it is coming under flack from employers and unfortunately also from the far right. They don't want a directive on the just transition. They reject the role of trades unions in the restructuring process. Such dogmatic positions are rather striking when what we need is social dialogue, protection for the rights of workers, which makes us stronger, does not hold us back. We need a just transition for economic and industrial policy which will be benefit to all rather than just the few.
The next speaker is Mélanie Desdier.
Madame le rapporteur.
Madam Rapporteur, as usual, we have the European Union in the role of pyromaniac firefighter. The EU's neoliberal policy is wallowing in green ideology and is a threat to our jobs. And some people here want to play God to mask their incompetence. Our companies should be placed in the hands of unions to avoid job losses. Europe, with its sterile technocracy, is not going to invest in our economy. Unfortunately, you're just sticking your heads in the sand, and you couldn't care less what's going to happen when your construct comes crashing down. I think instead of dealing with the symptoms, we should treat the illness. Jordan Bardella and the Patriots argue for the abolition of the Green Deal. As we say in our alternative motion for resolution, we should be helping our companies and not strangling them.
Is Carlo Ciccioli, and I really beg everyone to come early enough to the rostrum so that we don't spend time unnecessarily.
Nessuno dovrà essere lasciato indietro.
Leave no one behind. The Commission has been reassuring us with that slogan for years now, but not only have individuals been left behind, entire families and regions have been left behind as we see these mass dismissals in the Marche, in the centre of Italy. What we're seeing now is a full-on industrial decline. We're seeing electric appliances, domestic appliances, leaving the region. It's all going to Turkey, Turkey. And what we're seeing year on year is plants shutting down, transferring to Mexico, for instance. In Fabiano, we had a long tradition of production, which has dried up now too. These are not one-off cases. These are symptoms of an EU that doesn't support its own industrial fabric and jobs. Relocations are happening because people are finding a clear legislative framework, cheap energy, flexible conditions, less red tape. That's why they're moving elsewhere. We need to defend our industry and our communities.
Next speaker is Brigitte van den Berg.
Thank you, Chair. Change is Europe's biggest challenge, but we are not always very good at it. Sometimes Europe seems to wait until it's an absolute crisis for things to change. But to face climate change, the digital transition, and the unstable world, Europe needs to anticipate the future and transform itself. This resolution helps in some ways to do that. We should support companies in adapting to a new economy. Reskilling and upskilling our workforce should be the primary way of helping citizens to get better jobs. And where companies cannot avoid major restructuring, regions and citizens should be able to rely on the EU and the member states for help to find new economic opportunities. We should not resist change by imposing more rules on companies. We should embrace it, and we should turn it into an opportunity for a better Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And our next speaker is Maria Ohisalo.
Dear President, Commissioner, colleagues, for years we've known that governments and companies must be able to innovate and plan for the needed green and digital transitions. Still, we have almost 1 million jobs lost in manufacturing in only 4 years, proving that they haven't. The green and digital transition has a huge impact on work and the lives of workers. And now, Honourable Commissioner, you really have the possibility to make a difference in millions of people's lives. By giving a voice to the workers and social partners, embracing social dialogue, there is a way to make this transition a just one. While we welcome the Commission's plans aimed at preparing workers in a rapidly changing labour market, the Commission must put forward a proposal on Just Transition Directive now. This needs to happen sooner, not later, in order for us not to leave anyone behind.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Rudy Kennis.
Thank you, President, Commissioner, colleagues. Restructuring, it's a kind of a newspeak, isn't it? Companies are ashamed to say massive firing, so they call it restructuring. In Belgium, we had a few of them. In Limburg, 3,000 people fired. In Liège and Namur, 500 people. How long will we allow that lives of workers to be collateral damage? Restructuring also happens in the public sector, which has been privatized. Automotive, steel, energy, chemical, airlines, communications, railways, mail, banks, insurance, you just name it. Privatized and then restructured. No job security anymore. Bosses want no rules, no administrative burdens. Governments want to run their business everything like their business, including healthcare. There is no funding for public services, but always for weapons. This cannot go on. You can't fix neoliberalism by putting a plaster on it, like you cannot put lipstick on a pig. We need to put ordinary people at the heart of Europe. If you have a bad employer, it shouldn't be you who pay for their mistakes. They should respect the rules and cooperate with trade unions. We can develop a 21st century industrial policy. We can take back our public services and natural resources. We can create quality jobs and provide good services. Europe has the choice now. Continue to create uncertainty or invest and bring back a good standard of living for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Raúl de la Hoz Quintano.
Gracias, Presidenta. Si de verdad que...
Thank you, President. If we really want to go for competitiveness for our economy, then we cannot go on accepting labour relations trapped in obsolete templates which are holding back investment and growth for our companies. Of course, what we really need is instruments that will make everything more dynamic, agile, simpler, and that applies to labour relations too. But let's not kid ourselves. You can't achieve that if your initiative is intended to constrain decision-making that should happen at business level by introducing more red tape, creating more of an administrative burden for companies. If you see a crisis on the horizon, obviously there are moments when you can have conflict in terms of labour relations. But if you see a crisis on the horizon, you can't say, OK, let's make the trades unions even stronger within companies. Surely it would be more sensible to start by trying to avoid a crisis in labour relations, and that should one occur, it should have the minimum economic impact and also impact on jobs. It's not about ideology, it is a very clear issue of common sense.
Thank you very much. Gabriela Bischoff is the next speaker. Madam President, Vice President of the Commission, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you visit factories today, workers have huge concerns about how this transition is going to pan out and what it means for them. And that's why it's so important that in this transition, we have the workers on board and we don't have decisions taken over their heads, because if they're not implicated in what's being discussed, they're going to reject that transition out of hand. And that sort of damage to the workers damages also the company, damages the economy, damages our competitiveness. I agree with what the Commissioner said. When workers' voices are heard, it strengthens the resilience of companies. We've seen this in many studies. Where we have co-determination in companies, they're more innovative, they're more future-proofed, and they're more successful in economic terms. And this is why it constitutes a competitive advantage. If you see all these mails being sent round to members saying vote against this because it damages competitiveness and restricts the speed of decision-making, don't listen to those arguments. This is something that will damage us, will damage the economy and will damage our social model. Thank you. Paul Szekeres is the next speaker.
Thank you, President. Over the last decade, over 1 million jobs have been created in Hungary. We have the highest employment rate ever. Hungary is at the forefront of the technological revolution. We have 100 new factories. We have thousands of micro enterprises benefiting from a special national plan. All of this requires qualified labour. Having such objectives is all with a view to helping families, helping people have more children, helping people pay lower taxes. Mothers of 2 or more children will no longer have to pay income tax for life in Hungary. That's a unique initiative worldwide. Others could take a leaf from our book.
Lena Malloy.
Szanowni Państwo.
Ladies and gentlemen, social dialogue and respect for collective agreements should be the basis of any restructuring to make sure that workers receive the protection they deserve. In practice, in my country, workers' rights are not respected, and this is the country of solidarity. Thousands of people have been laid off in the post office, the railways. This is decimating strategic sectors as well as disrupting the lives of people and their families. The resolution we're discussing has to do with the automotive industry. These layoffs are one of the negative effects of climate policy. And until that changes, we are not going to have jobs and competitiveness in the European Union. I wonder if we have the courage to act, or are we going to just continue that the problem isn't there?
Anna Thom.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner, dear colleagues, there is no doubt that economic difficulties will affect many companies across the EU during these very turbulent times. And restructuring of other types of changes will be necessary so that companies can return to a more profitable situation. But these changes will be difficult and they will hurt many workers. So we see it is extremely timely to talk about the need to protect jobs and workers' rights. But I'm concerned about this growing trend in some member states, about thinking of jobs as numbers on a table or about workers as some faceless individuals that will go on with their lives unaffected by any jobs cuts. We have to stop this nonsense trend and remember that behind every job there is a worker that relies on that job for provide for their family, or a worker that worked hard to get where they are. And let us not forget that many people take pride in their work and feel a sense of purpose for doing their job. We need to be bold in protecting our workers that are stuck in the crossfire, first of all by focusing on real, not fake, social dialogue so that workers are involved in all plans to change. And also by having a framework that ensures new jobs will be created so that workers will have concrete, decent alternatives available. Thank you.
Sarah Mathieu, I don't see her, so I give the floor to Leila Chaibi.
Merci, Madame la Présidente, Madame la Commissaire. Renault a flingué.
Thank you, President. We've seen Michelin, ArcelorMittal, a whole set of factories closing down. The green and digital transition led to the loss of millions of jobs, but a transition could and should create jobs. But if you're to achieve that, you need to give support to industry. You need industrial reconversion. You need to look at the way you manage the economy. You can't leave everything to the market. We've got competition from highly subsidized e-vehicles and solar panels from the US and China, billions of subsidies. And when faced with that kind of competitiveness, what can you do? It's people are talking about trains and Teslas. We need to look at jobs, upskill, reskill, support production, ensure that workers are supported in reskilling. Only in that way can we create millions of jobs, ensure our industrial autonomy, and ensure that our continent has the wherewithal to stand proudly on the world stage.
Ladies and gentlemen, today we can demonstrate that we serve working people and their families. We stand with them even when it doesn't suit the big corporations. When they talk about restructuring, they mean layoffs, worsening working conditions and lower pay of the workers, not the management. Volkswagen Group announced restructuring when in the first 9 months of the year it made 16 billion euro. And the members of the board made 7 million in 2021. Workers in Volkswagen Slovakia got 27,000 on average. That's a 250-fold difference. This is the reality. By voting, we can make sure that restructuring serves working people and not the corporations.
Andras Kulia.
Tisztelt képviselőtársaim, engedjék meg.
Colleagues, I'd like to start with a question. How many of you would feel safe if your jobs were to disappear tomorrow across Europe, especially in Central and Eastern Europe? This is not a hypothetical question. It's a daily reality for many. Job insecurity is on the rise. Unpredictable contracts, excessive bureaucracy, outdated record-keeping systems leave many without work and help. And let's not forget, these are not mere statistics. We're talking about real people, families, and the future of their children. Workers deserve stability, fair wages, and adequate protection. And to do that, we need to act. First, we need to modernise employment services. We need office systems that better match the skills and needs of job seekers with forms of employment, alongside modern and dynamic retraining systems. We also need to invest in rural infrastructure so that workers feel secure and do not have to choose between the workplace and a modern education for their children. We need new frameworks that strengthen local economies, improve transport networks, and create jobs where people live. Fellow members, our world is changing. If we want to build a truly competitive and sustainable Europe, we must look not only at economic indicators, but also at the quality of life of our people.
Thank you, President. Commissioner, industry in the European Union is in choppy waters. Factories are closing, and every day in the news we see this happening. For example, 2 weeks ago in Brussels, the Audi factory that we visited, we talked to workers who had thought they had good prospects for the future, good ideas, but they weren't being listened to. There are millions of jobs that are under pressure in Europe, and there's a lot of uncertainty for workers as a result. We need to rethink the industry of the future, but we can only do that with people who have the expertise, because for this transition we need that expertise. We have to reflect on what they need. We have to have them on board to co-decide over what on the changes in the companies. Let's offer them retraining, but protect our workers, protect our industry against cheap imports and unfair competition. President, we need a guarantee of good jobs, of safe conditions and decent wages. Transition to the industry of the future has to do justice to the people who work in it, and let us make sure, above all, that nobody is left behind. Thank you.
Danke. Als nächste Rednerin Marie Dusch.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Marie Duchy.
L'industrie européenne meurt.
European industry is dying before our eyes, and it's not an accident. It's a political choice. Decades of free trade and foreign interest has sacrificed our workers, ruined our lands, and now you think that a few adjustments are going to overcome the damage. It's too late. This is all to disguise your responsibility. Millions of jobs are under threat. People need their cars, and you can't take them away from them. Not everyone is going to be able to buy an electric car, and not everybody is going to see the infrastructure appear that's necessary. Half measures are not enough, and doing away with the internal combustion engine is not the answer. Let's stop this mad ideology. We don't want a country with no industry, with no future. Europe should defend its people and not sacrifice them.
Elena Donatsan.
The next speaker is Elena Donatsan.
Thank you, President. For 4 generations, there was a company that had changed tack when the market demanded it, and recently they're doing it because the EU legislation has changed, not because the market has changed. That's what Nuti told us when the Trade Committee visited it in Italy. We're seeing jobs being lost, companies shutting down, and the rapporteur has said that there are great opportunities with the Green Deal, but in terms of the automotive sector, it's people closing down and jobs being lost. That's the only opportunity. We've heard in this chamber that the far right wants to destroy trades unions, but I've worked for 15 years hand in hand with a trades union, but we want to keep production going. We want to defend jobs, and this is not moving in the right direction, so ECR will vote against. Tomorrow we have an alternative resolution that will put businesses and workers at the heart.
The next speaker is Nicola Stefanuzza.
Suntem amândoi români și aseară am auzit o voce.
We're both Romanians, and we've heard populist voices addressed to the diaspora. Nobody should be insulted. We have to respect people who are building Europe today, people who are working in the construction industry, in farming. They are feeding all of us. These are people who are not appreciated by anybody. There are people who are looking after patients. We should be proud of these people. It is a question of pride to be building this continent. Don't go to the populists. If you have a problem, come to me or to Commissioner Manzatu.
Yes. Still a lot of time over.
Mulțumesc.
So the next speaker is Pasquale Tridico.
Presidente.
President.
L'Europa deve scegliere se tutelare il lavoro.
Europe has to make sure that it has work that is dignified. We're looking at the automobile sector, for example, and we know that we have to make sure we're competitive, but you can't always get dignified conditions because of dumping in the social sphere. But Commissioner, often it's not just enough to have a job to get yourself out of poverty. We need a minimum wage, minimum income. We need to look at tax on big companies as well to make sure that we can get people over that threshold of poverty. We have to make sure that we're not increasing disparities. The Five Star Movement is asking for a fund to help transition workers and have a shorter working week and to have a minimum wage that's universal. We want to stand shoulder to shoulder with workers against poverty and against disparities. Thank you.
The next speaker is Sergio Umberto.
Thank you very much. Dear President, dear Commissioner, dear colleagues, without populism and demagogy, what we need is for the EU to act. We need to defend jobs and workers' rights in Europe. That is and must be at the top of our priorities. Automation, globalization, green and digital transitions are having an impact on the labour market. We need an urgent adaptation of this for workers, and the solution is there. It's what we're doing. We're investing in continuous vocational training, upskilling, reskilling, changing the legislation, changing the enforcement of the rules in contracts, ensuring that fundamental rights are protected, but also attracting talent to Europe and ensuring that we have lifelong learning. That is absolutely vital to employability and sustainable economic development. We need to strike the right balance between innovation and social protection so that we have a labour market which is more inclusive and fairer.
Next speaker is Alicia Homs-Ginel.
Muchas gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you very much, Madam President, Vice President. Restructuring for dismissals whilst generating juicy profits, industrial transition with jobs, dignified jobs. Yes, we can't have a pretext here for making jobs less secure or doing away with collective bargaining. We need to ensure that workers have a voice, that companies receiving public funds should be investing in quality jobs. We need to have clear rules to stop abuse through subcontracting. In Spain, we have shown that there is an alternative way. You can have a social dialogue. You can have courageous measures. We've protected jobs and rights. We cannot accept that industrial modernisation in Europe should turn into the law of the jungle. We do want investment, but we need to ensure that there are social conditions in place, strong trades unions, workers' rights, because if you don't have social justice, then you can't have a just transition.
The next speaker is Konstantinos Arvanitis. And I would really remind you to come early enough to the rostrum because we lose a lot of time otherwise. Thank you.
Κύριε Επίτροπε, κυρίες και κύριοι.
Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, restructuring has been passed down from generation to generation, unfortunately. There are 3,000 workers who die each year at work, and that's something we need to bear in mind, because restructuring of factories cannot just be down to restructuring for economic benefit. We need to look at dignified work as well, collective bargaining agreements and other aspects. The industrial policy of the EU has to take into consideration the worker and put them front and centre. And this transition to clean industry includes having sensible democracy involved. That means the instruments that we have, artificial intelligence, they need to be deployed to the benefit of workers. This added value that is made by robots, that can't just go to capital, it has to go to workers as well, and that's important for people. So we need an industry and a development that serves everybody, not just an elite.
Is Isabelle Le Callennec.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam President. Commissioner, this resolution refers to Schumpeter's creative destruction, when innovation renders current activities obsolete. You end up with a period of unemployment before something new comes along. This is why there are layoffs. I come from Brittany. Feel free to come and visit, Commissioner. We are trying to manage jobs there together with social partners in advance. We are looking ahead. We have a shortage of labour on the one hand, and this is why we emphasize vocational training. But you need human and financial resources to do that. In a situation of restructuring, what is the Commission doing to balance supply and demand together with the Member States?
Raffaele Topo.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, President, Commissioner, colleagues. If you want to reform the European economy and invest in new industry whilst ensuring that you have quality jobs, then you are first and foremost doing what Europe needs, but you need to ensure that investment will support the general interest that the jobs that you create will be quality jobs. We need a European fund for competitiveness, as the Commissioner and the President of the Commission have said. But we need to deal with the issues related to restructuring the green and digital transitions with effective instruments for protecting jobs, workers' rights and businesses. SURE is an example of such an instrument to deal with the danger of dismissal, supporting millions of workers during the crisis. That kind of industry can support income, including for self-employed. So we would like to see further initiatives along these lines in line with the resolution we approved.
Next speaker is Özlem Demirel.
Dankeschön.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Dividends are going up and the workers are being impoverished. Ladies and gentlemen, at the moment I feel two hearts beating in my chest. Worry and hope. On the one hand, the louder calls to slimline, cut working hours, get rid of working holidays to finance the huge rearmaments in Germany. And that seems only to be the start of a future development. So let's say very clearly, those who are calling for this have drawn up their accounts without taking into consideration the workers. And that is where my hope springs from. On the 15th of March in Germany, the colleagues from the metal and other industries and their unions will be demonstrating for future-proof jobs. Those working in the public sector should have decent wages and better working conditions. We stand side by side with you. Any alliance of the interests of capital will feel the wrath of a counter demonstration from us.
Bardzo dziękuję.
Thank you very much. Beko makes washing machines and fridges, and they are laying people off in Łódź and Wrocław. Audi is closing Brussels, and 3,000 people lost their jobs. There are people protesting in Brussels and elsewhere. Industry is the basis of an economy, but climate neutrality legislation is leading to factory closures in southern Poland, including the city of Krakow. The result is unemployment. And this is what's happening now in Europe. And Europe needs to react to these situations. It has to demonstrate that it's different to the rest of the world. Lower energy prices for industry and revision of ETS, that is something that can increase competitiveness.
From Mr. Ronsa, do you accept it?
Yes. Tak, bardzo dziękuję, Pani Przewodnicząca.
Thank you very much, Madam President. You talked about various companies which are laying people off in the European Union at the moment. You're from the Tusk government, and the Polish post office is laying off 10,000 people. PKP Cargo, the railway freight company, is laying off thousands of people. Now, you're talking about private businesses that are laying people off, but the Polish state is laying people off. Why aren't you talking about that?
Blue card, just 1 minute, also the
Bardzo
answer.
dziękuję posłowi partii.
Thank you. Thank you to the man from the Kaczynski party. They ran Poland for 8 years. They ran PKP Cargo, among other things. When you handed over PKP Cargo, it was on the verge of bankruptcy. And unfortunately, you have taken state companies to the abyss, and yet here you are trying to claim something else. You were in government for 8 years. This is your mess.
Ich möchte darauf hinweisen.
Could I just point out that I did make a mistake? You get 30 seconds to put a question and 30 seconds to answer the question. So please, to respect those colleagues who like to speak under Catch the Eye, I would request that you keep to your speaking time. Johan Danielsson. Thank you very much, Madam President, Commissioner. More than 10% of unemployment. These are the headlines that the Swedes see when they switch on the TV and see the news. Behind every new layoff, there are people and whole communities that have to ask the question, what happens now? Just this morning on the news, we saw that Northvolt, the Swedish battery producer, is going bankrupt. And so those people being laid off in these sectors that are central, fundamental for Europe's industrial future, in car manufacture and battery production, for example. What we do here will be decisive for the future of this continent's competitiveness. If we to cope with all this, we need to generate markets which are more resilient, with stronger unions, with securer workers. We need to be able to be at the fore and manage the dark times and come out stronger. But if we don't manage the workers, there'll be no new industry in Europe.
The next speaker is Giuseppe Antocci.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, Madam President. I can't believe what's going on. It's outrageous. In Catania, where we're producing electronics, major semiconductor producer, 2 billion euros state aid approved by the European Commission intended for building a new plant. And yet, the company has announced that we'll be looking at 2,400 or so dismissals. A total scandal, and sowing such anguish for workers and their families. The EU is saying that public financing should turn into real investment for stable jobs. That's what is preached. I would call on all parties involved to ensure that territories such as Ledra Valle can have their share of Europe's technological future.
The next speaker under Catch the Eye, or the first speaker under Catch the Eye, is Michał Czerba.
Szanowni Państwo, rozmawiamy o rzeczy.
Ladies and gentlemen, this matter is very important. At the heart of the European economy, we have human beings, and that makes us different to other places, authoritarian countries. What's most important to us is for every person to have their rights guaranteed, including their rights as a worker. I'd like to talk about some of the new arrangements to enable European companies to compete with other countries. And this is extremely important. You need social dialogue. And I appeal to the European Commission to make sure that there always is social dialogue with the trade unions, with the employers, in order to reach a compromise. This is what we try to do in Poland. This is, I believe, vital, especially now as we're turning our attention to the defense industry. We need to be sure there is always dialogue.
There is Elena Sancho Murillo.
Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to take this opportunity of having this debate and the Commission present to tell you about Navarre. RSH, 360 employees facing unemployment because the company has folded. We can't play with people's lives like this. In Navarre, Spain and Europe, we are competitive. The company is competitive. The manufacturing plant is competitive. We have a duty to citizens. So I turn to the Commission. You need to act here. We're talking about 360 families and their future at stake. We cannot turn a blind eye to this. We're looking at 660 people facing uncertainty. They face the uncertainty of possible unemployment as of June. Please let us step in to help them, because by June it will be too late.
Thank you very much. Margarita de la Pisa Carrion's the next speaker.
Presidente, señorías.
Thank you, Madam President. Members, the best way to protect employment and workers is to facilitate initiatives and creative thinking. SMEs constitute almost half of our businesses in Spain, most in agriculture, and they face excessive bureaucratic burdens that put their activities in danger. They come to us and say, we are alarmed. We think the Commission proposal makes no sense. About 1 million jobs have been lost in the automotive sector because of the impact of the Green Deal. We are aware of the social consequences of the transition, but we're seeing such hypocrisy from the EPP. They're talking about competitiveness and job losses. They make these declarations calling for people to be sensible, but then they vote along with the socialists that are dragging the whole of Europe down.
Speaker is Sebastian Tinkinen.
Arvoisa puhemies.
Thank you, Madam President. The workers are a pillar of Europe's success, but unfortunately the future for them is bleak. Given the immigration policy we have and the climate policy we have, mistakes have been made. And who's going to pay for these mistakes? European workers. For example, the European Commission's Green Deal is blocking the birth of a new European industry, and it's increasing industrial flight from Europe. That means fewer jobs. This is a policy we should oppose, this left-wing policy, but it doesn't seem to interest the red-green trade unions. But I am interested. Other conservatives are interested.
La commissaire.
Commissioner, I'd like to address a subject that hasn't been covered in this debate yet. It's not surprising, because when we talk about restructuring, you often think of big sectors, big industrial organisations and companies, but there is a sector that employs more than 8 million people. 86% are women, a quarter of them aren't in Europe, 70% are working on the black, and that's the domestic service sector, people who clean your house and look after ill people, and that sector is being destroyed. 37 million people in Europe will soon be over the age of 60, and that means that sector will have to develop despite the care sector, and the restructuring of this sector is insufficient. On the 7th of January 2025, the Court of Justice of the European Union judged that the national administrations don't respect the Working Time Directive. What actions are you going to take to make sure that the changes in this sector can be governed?
Speaker is Maria Zaccaria.
Πιστεύω έχει έρθει η στιγμή να δούμε τον μπροστά που έρχεται.
Thank you. I think the time has come to look towards the future with courageous measures. Workers need protection from automation and technology. We should discuss automation properly and decide upon a framework for it. If you have added value, that should be for society, not just for capitalists. It's society that has financed the growth of the technology sector, so it should reap the benefits too. The word restructuring can hide many ills. There are infringements of workers' rights. restructuring is taking place without true worker participation. Workers' representatives are invited along. They simply witness what is happening. They're not given the opportunity to participate in negotiations. This must change. Only in that way can jobs and workers' rights be safeguarded in practice, not just on paper, when workers can really play a substantive role in discussions about their own workplace. Colleagues on the right, slavery is over. Please, let's get up to date.
Ja, danke, Frau Präsidentin.
Thank you, Madam President, Commissioner. Our companies are under more pressure than ever, and ladies and gentlemen, we have to act here. We need to be in a constant dialogue with each other to find the best solutions to generate the most socially acceptable way of dealing with the challenges of our time. That means we shouldn't overburden our companies from Brussels. We need to have an appropriate framework with an investment-friendly arrangement so that we're not fighting capital, because fighting capital at the end of the day has never generated jobs. Behind every company there are millions of workers who, at the end of the day, need their wages and salaries to deal with the increase in the cost of living today and help found families and take Europe into the next generation. So strong workers' rights chiming with other rights and company rights, which will generate a strong economy. These aren't things that should be pitted one against the other. Now, to wind up the debate, I give the floor to our Commissioner Roxana Minzato.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for this important debate. I thank the rapporteur, Esther Kellemans, for bringing this topic to our attention, to your attention. I would start with an example in my conclusions, looking at one of the industries that is undergoing transformations, the automotive sector. We looked at what we need to do there to protect quality jobs, because indeed this is a sector where workers have, or in the working conditions of professionals, there have been investments. There have been investments in their training, in their health and safety. So these are jobs that we really do not want to lose, and we want to protect the expertise and the knowledge of these people. So in the Automotive Action Plan, we proposed several concrete measures. One that I would mention is to really adjust and to improve the power of the Global Adjustment Fund, so that it is a fund that can really support workers before they are laid off, so that we can really intervene with EU funding to support companies, to support those workers before they are exposed to being laid off. But beyond that, I would mention that indeed there are several solutions that we need to look at. First, social dialogue and collective bargaining. We have just signed the Pact for Social Dialogue last Wednesday, and it is an important step, and it's an important process that creates trust between employers and trade unions. No transition, and there will be many types of transitions, and we have to be prepared for this ever-changing landscape, can be done properly for the benefit of entrepreneurs and the equal benefit of workers without a quality and strong social dialogue. Also, I would underline what I mentioned a bit earlier, the skills guarantee that we propose to the Union of Skills. We cannot protect workers better than by training, retraining, upskilling, reskilling them, so that they are able to find a job in the same company, in the same industry, in similar industries, without losing their expertise, their knowledge, protecting them, giving them a secure access to better work. And third, of course, it's the quality jobs roadmap and the initiatives that will follow. Many of the things that you have mentioned here will be dealt with in this quality jobs roadmap, from working conditions to fair wages, to health and security in the workplace, to fair transition, anticipation and management of change, dealing with third country nationals, for all industries. And let us not forget, while we are talking about restructuring and job loss, there are still industries where millions of jobs are still unoccupied, from ICT to construction, where we need to still fill the gaps. We need to work to match these deficits with the surplus wherever this will be possible, and to use EU funding and our policies to do that in coordination with the Member States. I thank the Parliament for having this important conversation. We cannot end now. It is clearly an important part of our mandate, and I'm looking forward to your support in our work. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Frau Kommissarin.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I'd like to wind this debate up by saying that there were 2 resolutions being received. The debate is closed. The vote will take place tomorrow. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, and this is an oral question to the Council and the Commission on the adoption of the proposal for a parenthood regulation. First of all, I give the floor to the author, Ilan Kuchuk.
Thank you, Madam President, dear Commissioner, dear representatives of the Council, and they are not present yet. If you are a parent in one country, you are